Last month, Joe Rogan hosted Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey in what may be the most disliked episode in the storied history of his podcast, and it was easy to tell why. Jack was incoherent in describing the obviously partisan enforcement of rules on his website. He was totally unable to describe either the rules themselves or the enforcement of them in any clear terms. One particular exchange had me furiously smashing my keyboard. Jack insisted that Alex Jones had clearly violated Twitter terms.
People, I think, would have assumed that we would just have followed suit, but he didn't violate our terms of service.
Right.
And afterwards, he did. We have a policy, and if there's a violation, we take enforcement actions.
Except less than a minute later, Jack could not answer the obvious question. How?
So what did he do on your platform that was like, that you all were in agreement that this is enough?
I'm not sure what the actual violations were.
If you know something with certainty, but you still can't explain it, that's a giant red flag, and it's a flag that got even redder in the follow-up episode that streamed on Tuesday, much to my pleasant surprise, with Tim Pool also in studio to offer challenge to Jack, who is now joined by his trust and safety chief, Vijay Gadi. Credit to Tim for coming prepared with a series of questions and pieces of evidence that expose the flaws in Twitter's leadership philosophy. What surfaced is an obvious philosophical disconnect, a set of incompatible goals Twitter is trying to pursue simultaneously, and what you end up with is a series of nonsensical outcomes where Kathy Griffin trying to dox the Covington kids is just fine, but a feminist gets banned for saying simply that men are not women, just to name a few recent examples. On the one hand, there are some thoughts in Jack's head that I think are on point. The first goal he describes, I actually think makes a lot of sense, that the individual user should have maximum control over his own experience, that he should be able to curate content he wants to see or doesn't want to see himself to suit his own desires. Both Jack and Vijay speak to this effect.
The more control we can give people to vary the spectrum on what they want to see, that feels right to me.
These are the kinds of things that we're thinking about. How do we give power back to the people using our service so that they can see what they want to see and they can participate the way they want to participate?
And if that's what you believe in, individual control of his own experience to the maximum possible extent, then the only limitation on what you allow is the confines of the law. And within those confines, the solution is simple, and Jack gets it exactly right.
Given this entire corpus of conversation and content within the world, we're going to work to promote healthy public conversation. That's what we want. That's what we want to do. And if you disagree with it, you should be able to turn it off. And you should be able to access anything that you want, as you would with the internet.
Is there something on Twitter that you subjectively don't like? There are tools for that. Don't follow what you don't like. Mute someone who's saying things you don't like. Block them if they're being extra annoying. And if what they're doing is illegal, call the cops. That's the right way to handle the Twitter experience for many reasons. Practically speaking, it's the only realistic way. They themselves say during this discussion that Twitter's user reports are on such a scale that they simply can't get to all of them. Additionally, it eliminates the subjective enforcement of rules. What I like to see on Twitter is subjective to my personal taste, and my subjective taste should not be imposed upon you. You should be able to cater your experience to your own tastes. Lastly, it's just the moral thing to do. It allows me to tune out from things I don't like without infringing upon your ability to say and see whatever you want. Me muting you is not me silencing you. It's just that I choose not to listen to what you have to say. Plugging my own ears is much more considerate than duct taping your mouth. But from here, Twitter's philosophy deviates, and they start to turn their backs on that idea that I am the best policeman for my own personal tastes. And it all hinges on this weird belief that somehow I can use my speech to silence your speech. They repeat this idea several times.
I believe that everyone has a voice and should be able to use it. And I want them to be able to use it online. Now, where we draw a line is when people use their voice and use their platform to abuse and harass other people to silence them. We can't sit back and let people be abused and harassed and silenced on the platform.
What we're trying to drive is opportunity for every single person to be able to speak freely on the platform. The recognition that we're taking action on is that when some people encounter particular conduct, that we see them wanting to remove themselves from the platform completely, which goes against that principle of enabling everyone to speak or giving people the opportunity to speak.
The idea that you can silence my speech with your speech is simply nonsense. Every single time I post a link to my new video on Twitter, there are replies that are critical. There are replies that tell me I suck. And then there are emails that tell me I suck. And then there are comments on the video that tell me I suck, and I mute these people if I find them annoying, and then I carry on speaking because their critical speech does not give them magical control over my account. They are incapable of shutting me up, and I make the decision that I will not let them. The standard of what counts as abuse cannot be whether I felt subjectively demoralized by it. Some people's sensitivity is higher than others, which is why the best tools would give me more control over curating to my own sensitivity, not to ban those other people on account of my feelings. But because Twitter also wants to be the heroes of the subjectively demoralized, they hold other stances that are in 180-degree opposition to what we just heard about giving you maximum control for yourself. They want to be your mother who looks out for you too.
In many cases, if they do it again, we give them a timeout, which is like 7 days. And we say, look, you've done it again.
Suspension.
It's a temporary suspension. If you do it again,
Timeout, you're a mom.
I'm totally a mom. Exactly.
And because what you feel harassed by or demoralized by are inherently subjective, you get all sorts of nonsensical, inconsistent outcomes from mom just looking out for what's best for her kids. Not punishing Kathy Griffin for trying to dox those Covington kids? Whoops. That was a mistake.
What did you guys do with Kathy Griffin when she was saying she wanted the names of those young kids wearing the MAGA hats at the Covington High School kids?
Yeah, our doxing policy really focuses on posting private information, which we don't consider names to be private.
Do you think that was an error?
We're going to learn. We're going to make a ton of mistakes.
Banning people for saying learn to code. Whoopsie. That was another mistake.
You literally see legitimate high-profile individuals getting suspensions for joining in on a joke.
Oh, there for sure probably mistakes in there.
Threatening violence against Tim is fine, but calling Tim gay will get you banned. Darn it, Mom. Another mistake.
I was covering a story in Berkeley, and someone said, if you see him, attack him. And Twitter told me after review it was not a violation of their policy. Somebody made an allusion to me being a homosexual, and I reported that. Instantly gone.
Tim, that's a mistake.
Funny how mom's mistakes are always heavily leaning in one particular ideological direction, but it shouldn't surprise us given the system they've designed. If subjective feelings about demoralization are the standard, you're going to get this sort of silly, inconsistent, subjective result. Vidya even inadvertently demonstrated the absurdity of this standard, talking about being misgendered by Joe.
Like I asked you guys when you were going to take a photo in front of this thing, I said, guys, but I included you.
I wasn't offended.
Thank you for
and
not
I
being
wouldn't
offended.
have reported you for it.
Thank you.
Okay, but whether or not you were offended is not the meaningful distinction here. That's not the standard that matters. Maybe I'm reading too much into just a comment in passing here, but what if she had been offended? Is that supposed to matter? Is that the distinction that determines whether what Joe said is good or bad, punishable or non-punishable? If so, how can we possibly police the speech of others according to the subjective whims of the individual? Everyone is offended by something, and so the only solution in that scenario is everyone shuts up. Or alternatively, each individual is responsible for tending to his own unique needs. Either mom puts everyone in a timeout, or maybe the kids grow up a bit and start taking care of themselves. That is the philosophical crisis. That is the internal contradiction that Twitter will have to reconcile. Do they really believe in maximizing the individual's power to curate content for himself? If so, then all of this mom talk has to stop. Or do they want to be mom, babying their own platform on behalf of the most sensitive? If so, then all of this empower the user and maximize the user base talk has to stop. You can't have it both ways, and right now they really have neither. It's still a platform that wants mom to have more control than the individual, But mom's rules are just all over the place nonsense, like no ice cream for dinner, but potato chips are just fine, because the ice cream is racist and the chips come from a marginalized community. Mom's heavy-handedness is arbitrary, and it doesn't produce any positive results. I still love Twitter, at least in concept. But man, do I wish they would try less restrictions for once. They've tried banning people for years. It hasn't reduced political division. It hasn't contributed to people's enjoyment of the platform. And it hasn't created investor confidence. If you invested in Twitter 5 years ago today, you've eaten a nearly 40% loss. Any other point in that time period, you're lucky if you're breaking even. I hope Jack considers what Tim had to say during this podcast. I hope he sticks with his stated commitment of empowering the individual instead of empowering himself, and pursuant to that goal, I hope Jack gives increased freedom a try instead of increased censorship. We let mom have control. It didn't work. It's time for dad to grow a pair and expect the same from people who can't handle mean words. You gave the best solution yourself, Jack.
And if you disagree with it, you should be able to turn it off.
Now stick with it. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and still especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Goodbye.